Hey guys, how's it going? Preparing here. So I know a lot of people who play Path of Exile, when they get started, they kind of look for what the overpowered builds have in common, so they can kind of understand the depth behind the good stuff in the game. And I've kind of posed this question myself as well. This is something that I really look at when I explore a new game, and it is something that I can give you guys some advice on because I have it. Figured out on a macro scale. Obviously, people will find new overpowered builds all the time, but the basis of them is typically very, very similar. They have a lot of things in common, and I kind of want to highlight those things today. So the first thing that most builds have in common is figuring out one or a few kind of overpowered skills. So in this case, I'm going to show you guys my Freeze Pulse character. So I use with a Blood Magic, but Blood Magic is not really important. It just kind of helps me use greater multiple projectiles instead of lesser multiple because it's more powerful with the build, because the mana cost is kind of high. So the basis is find a spell that's fairly powerful, Freezing Pulse. Find a way to make it more powerful, so with added lightning damage. When I crit, the shock chance cascades, so it shocks the target 5 times and keeps the 3 longest shocks. So basically, I do more damage during the crit. That's why it's very, very powerful. So the idea behind my build is using Freeze Pulse with added lightning and with greater multiple projectiles. These 3 are essentially extremely powerful if you have high crit chance and if you have the mana cost to support it. So in my case, I have the mana cost to support it by using a Blood Magic gem, or you can go Blood Magic if you want. And then you want some kind of defensive backing to your skill. In my opinion, it's best to have this kind of Blood Magic Life Leech combo compared to just Life Leech or just getting Blood Magic in the skill tree, because this allows you to pretty much do every single map in the game. That's another factor. Being able, like a lot of people who start this game, they don't really understand maps, but there are places where you can look at to see the affixes on maps. So when you do a map, it has a positive and a negative, and it's usually a combination of the two. It's a negative that is not that harmful to most classes, that rewards a lot. There's not that many of those, but there's other times where you need to make a rare map, and you need to be able to do some very difficult affixes with your character. So point number 1, get a really overpowered skill combo. Build your character around that while making sure that you can kind of counter the map properties. So that's really where it starts, figuring out a really nice skill. Now, how do you augment that? Well, you have to look at the skill tree. So in my case, that spell, it really scales off of crit. So my basis on the skill tree was to get as much life as possible, so I can be very tanky and use these very high cost spells. I started as a Marauder as such. I needed really high resists to counteract Reflect. That's why I'm not Blood Magic, so I can use the Purity Aura and get my resists to a very high level. My resists are 83. They will soon be 85 when my Purity hits level 20. So get all the HP, get all the resists. Armor is not really that important. I have Determination. I have like 6k armor. 6k armor is pretty much enough to mitigate all the crappy mobs. No big deal. So I just go around. I started this character by getting every single HP node. And after I got all the HP nodes, I was like level 70 or so. Then I started to get all the damage nodes. So I got all the crit. I got the crit there, the crit there, crit here, crit there, and I'm working towards Doomcast right now. But instead of going 1, 2, 3, I'm going to go 1. I'm gonna get this for that point, and then get 2 for projectile damage. Then I'm gonna respec 1, 2, 3 once I level another time and put it back in there. 1, 2, 3, and that will be the 4th level when I would do the respec for Doomcast. So that's kind of how I do. That's kind of how I move the points around at high level. But that's the idea. Get as much survivability as possible because it's a balance. The game allows you to do very interesting things. You can get an absurd amount of damage. You can get an absurd amount of defense. But to balance both with an acceptable level requires you to find a very powerful skill that scales off of very few things. In my case, it scales off of crit. In other cases, for instance, when it comes to like an EK-based character, Ethereal Knives, also considered to be one of the most powerful skills in the game, the skill itself does all the damage you ever need, but the problem is surviving Reflect mobs. So as a consequence, all you do really you make a character and you get every single defensive ability you could possibly get. And as such, you have enough damage just from the skill itself. But when you fight a reflect mob, you need as much armor and as much life as possible so you don't die. That's something to keep in mind. That'll be very important with that build. But the basis is the same. You have a ton of survivability, and the survivability counters your weakness, which is reflect. So you have very good damage and very good survivability. Other builds like lightning arrow. People like to use lightning arrow because it's the most powerful projectile attack in the game, and projectile attacks are notably powerful because of certain few stats. So in my case, I don't have a very good wand, but just to highlight an example, 5 to 11 fire damage. Okay, so my neck has 1 to 5. This can be like 60 lightning damage, for instance, on the necklace, if I got one that was good for the build. So with the basis of that build, with projectile attacks, what you do is you find gear and you find auras and you find different ways that you can add elemental damage, just like a wander, for instance. And you scale the elemental damage with the gem, weapon elemental damage. And because you're getting the damage from your gear, and because you're getting the scaling from your gems, you don't need to get any damage on the tree. So on the skill tree, again, it becomes a fact of getting as many survivability nodes as possible. And in that case, you can kind of achieve an overbalance of both. So that's really what all the builds have in common. Just to recap, find an overpowered skill combo. You kind of treat it so you can get good scaling out of it, so you don't have to invest too many points in making it really powerful. So you can have a very high offense and a very high defense. Probably want to get started with a very high defense. You kind of want to make sure that you can scale it either through gear in a certain way. Be very aware of what you're doing so you can make it so your character can eventually manage its resources and do all that is required to beat all the maps. Some classes are stronger than others, but in the end, the map flexibility will make a stronger character than the other. For instance, my character would be stronger if I went Eldritch Battery instead of using blood magic gems on everything. But then if I do a half regen map, I will struggle a lot, and I would not be able to do a no regen map at all. So the other thing is I wouldn't be using another red gem, so I couldn't use armor-based armor. But while I have better offense doing it that way, with this way, it's much more stable, it's much more reliable. I don't have to worry about certain pieces of gear, so I can focus on others, and it allows me to have much greater map flexibility. So those are all the things to keep in mind, and I hope you guys enjoy building some new characters, because honestly, in Path of Exile, with as much customization as there is, there's still a lot of options left, and making your own build, in my opinion, is one of the most cool things you can do in this game. So I hope you guys get some inspiration from my basics of how to build an OP character, and find a nice niche of your own. And I'll see you guys tomorrow.